Hey, how's it going everybody? It's your boy Meteor Kaiser here, back again with another Fire Emblem Can You Beat? Today we're going to be jumping right back into Sacred Stones as per usual, and we're going to be seeing if we can beat the game with only Pegasus Knights. We're going to be keeping the rules pretty simple, so that means only Pegasus Knights are going to be able to be used, so that is Vanessa, Tana, and Cyrene. No arenas, no Tower of Valny, none of that stuff. Besides that, it's going to be pretty simple. Everything else is basically free game. There's going to be a few adjustments here. So first of all, I'm just doing regular difficulty for this one, just because, well, to be honest, there wasn't really a reason. I just clicked regular instead of what I've been thinking about it. I'm like, we'll be fine. But guys, I really do appreciate you sticking around for me being lackluster on uploads. Yeah, I don't really have an excuse, but I still appreciate it. But anyway, so there's that. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is there's going to be a slight difference in this game. So starting with the prologue, The Fall of Renee, I've slightly adjusted the game. It's not really a mod, it's just a replacement. So I've taken the files using, was it FE Loader or whatever it's called, and I've replaced Erica with Vanessa, so that way I don't have to babysit a useless lord. That way Vanessa has the ability to seize, capture, all of that stuff, so she's basically treated as the Erica for this run. And in order to just make my life slightly easier to start with, I give Vanessa out an Iron Lance, because I don't get access to the rapier like Erica does. So I'm like, I'll give myself an Iron Lance instead of just the standard Slim Lance. That way I can do a little bit more damage considering what I'm facing on this first chapter. So normally, you're fighting against axe users with a sword user, and you have the weapon triangle advantage. However, now that I'm a Lance Lord, technically it's going to be a lot harder. With the weapon triangle disadvantage now, I'm going to have to do a little bit of hit and run strategy. Not only are the regular enemies pretty strong here, they could 3-shot me, the boss O'Neill 2-shots me, so I pretty much have to do hit and run strat of unequipping all the weapons on Seth, using him as bait, and then I'll attack with Vanessa, heal and hide in the mountains, and just rinse and repeat. And I pretty much run out of all my vulneries, but I'm able to somehow squeak out a victory, and I move on to chapter 1, Escape. So I use pretty much the exact same strategy here, except for the fact that we had forts in this chapter. So I rush to the north area where France and Gillem spawn, unequip Gillem, and I do the same thing as last chapter. So I'm just hiding Seth and Gillem, and then putting Vanessa on the fort to be able to give her at least a little bit of experience. She could survive a little bit more on a fort, considering I get that +2 defense and 20 avoid, which really does help. Or +1 defense, either or. And by the time I actually get over to the boss Brigette, I'm already level 5, so Vanessa's not doing too bad. However, the boss Brigette is a pretty bad matchup for my low strength, and I have, a decent amount of vulneraries. I've got the ones from France and Gillem, so I'm at least chilling on that side of things. But in order to clear this chapter, I have to farm a little, basically, so I'm using the forts to heal up, and then I'm going back and attacking. This is going to be a strategy that I'm using a lot in this run, is the end turn strat, where I do not feel comfortable attacking on player phase, so I will just end turn, and then just let the enemy attack me. I heal up on player phase if need be, and I just keep doing this over and over again, and eventually I do land a crit. My crit percent is only it's less than 10, but it's still I'm very lucky, and I could have farmed here for a little bit longer, but that would have been irritating for me, and probably breaking the game a little too much too early. But anyway, I'm able to seize, which is great because that actually means the edit is working. And I move on to chapter 2, Protected. So I pull off a slightly different strategy here. I'm gonna ignore Ross and Garcia immediately. They're just irrelevant to me. I grab the immediate village and I ignore the bottom village at first, as I'm not that concerned about a pure water. I do collect it later on. However, it's not a necessity for this run, really, because pure waters aren't going to be that useful against most enemies in this game. There's a lot more physical attackers, especially with all the monsters and stuff. But anyway, I use Seth as bait for the West Brigands and have Vanessa sit on the fort to slowly deal with the Southern Brigands, including the roaming boss Bone. Vanessa is able to reach level 9 by this point, and her stats are pretty decent so far. I'm very happy actually so far. It's only been a few levels, and speed is already hitting 17, which is kind of understandable, but it's this is really nice. I'm very happy with my level so far. And we move on to chapter 3, The Bandits of Borgo. First chapter with archers, but at least here they're placed in a way that I can easily take them out without too much of a fuss. This chapter isn't too bad, besides from the boss Bazba and his steel axe. So I do the same strat as in chapter 1 because, again, the steel axe and Vasba's pretty scary. The weapon triangle disadvantage is not helping at all. So I have to end turn and just let, him attack me. Vasba can two-shot Vanessa, so that's not fun, and Vanessa only does 7 damage back. But with patience and enough vulneraries, by this point I also have Colm and a few other units that I could just steal their vulneraries and use those, so it's not too bad. We move on to chapter 4, Ancient Horrors. Now, the bosses of the last few chapters have been the worst part from this, but this was a snooze fest comparatively. Chapter 4 is generally meant as a catch-up chapter for early game, so it's meant to help those lower level units, especially your Archer and your loot that you get in this chapter. Archer is a force deploy, so I have to have him hide in the back. But basically I have Vanessa just flying around the chapter, just murdering everything in sight. The only thing that would have given me issues in the past would have been the eyeballs, but even they weren't too bad. The Revenants were a joke, and the boss Revenant was pretty easy as well. So we're able to move on to chapter 5, Empire's Reach. So there are a couple of variables that make this chapter harder than normal. So first are the archers that are scattered among the other units, which is a huge threat to Vanessa. They're a little bit more intertwined with other units, so that means they're not going to be staggered and you can just separate them from other units. It's a situation where you have to either prioritize defeating the archer and putting yourself in harm's way of other units, or backing up entirely. Joshua is also here, and he has a killing edge, which did actually make me reset once due to a very unlucky crit on enemy phase. And when I went back on the next run to actually attack him, his attack wasn't that great, but that crit rate was what really screwed me over. 20% was enough to just destroy me in one hit. Then the other thing I have to do is I have to protect Natasha, and I have to reach the villages before the brigands do, so it takes me a few turns to beat all of these threats entirely, but I'm able to make it to the boss Tsar, which, thankfully, compared to the other bosses, was a joke. I beat him in 2 hits. It was pretty nice. And with that, 5 chapters in, Vanessa has reached max level. Alright, you ready for this? It's 26 HP, 14 strength, 18 skill, 20 speed, 15 luck, 12 defense, and 13 resistance. This is no doubt probably the best Vanessa I've ever gotten. I am so surprised at how great her stat growths have been so far. Jesus, 14 strength? That's way above average. That's about 45%-ish on average. And her strength growth is something I think 35, 30, something along those lines, I think. And that's just really nice. Well, I have a surprise for you guys later down the line, though. But anyway, we're able to skip the Gaiden chapter, one of the few Gaiden chapters in this run, Unbroken Heart, because it's Ephraim and his journey, which does not matter to us. So we're just going to skip directly ahead to chapter 6, Victims of War. So this is a Fog of War chapter, and most times that I've ever played this game, this has been a very frustrating chapter, trying to protect the villagers real quickly before the spider comes to get them, and everything just being kind of slow. But considering I have one single super unit, this chapter was a complete joke. Now, I do not pick up the village because I just decided to just beeline it for the villagers. I'm like, whatever, I'm just gonna protect them, get the Orion's Bolt, I think they give you, I'm pretty sure. So I defeat that spider real quick, and then I just go straight to the boss, because I know where the boss area is. I've played this map more times than I can count. It's for this game, boss placements, I know where they're at, but the regular units, I have no idea, because I don't memorize that stuff. And in that village, it was an antitoxin, and if I'm not going to get hit anyway, or if it's going to do 1 to 2 damage, and I have pretty decent defense and resistance for this point in the game, I'm okay. But anyway, we move on to chapter 7, Waterside Renval. Also another chapter that I would normally struggle with, but completely and utterly made it trivial in this. So normally in this chapter you'd have to weave through and defeat the ballistas on either side, get through the mages that are coming out of the forest, all that type of stuff. This one, I literally just go up the left side, defeat the archer that's there just to get rid of him, fly over to the middle, defeat those 2 archers that are on the bridge, and then I just focus on the boss Murray, and he's not too difficult for me, so literally within 4 turns, I'm able to beat the chapter. Complete joke, it was great. So we move on to chapter 8. It's a trap! So this one's slightly more annoying, only because I want to make sure Ephraim and the others do not do anything. I want them to hide in the bottom, and just let Vanessa get over there as quickly as possible, so she can deal with those enemies. and that they don't get too many unnecessary kills. I understand that I might have to do like 1 or 2 kills because Vanessa is not that quick, and I do need Ephraim alive, but it is what it is. I'm not too concerned about that, considering I know they would have gotten kills because they were in 5x, but I just kept it as minimal as humanly possible. But after that, the rest of the chapter was very nice and simple. I just went up the left side down that pathway. It took a little bit of time because it was just a long chapter, but I'm able to reach Torado, the boss general, who did a decent chunk of damage. He has a silver lance and it did about 15 damage, but I mean, it's at the end of the day, if I just use my old end turn strat, it's pretty easy. And I'm able to move on to chapter 9, Distant Blade. Now, of course, we're going Erica's route. That would make no sense to go Ephraim's route. That would have been funny if I did, but stupid. At the beginning of this chapter, we get our second unit. We get Tana. And this chapter was probably harder than I should have made it to be, because I spent too much of my time trying to get Tana levels that I put her in harm's way and got her sniped by there's a sniper like immediately. I got her sniped about 3 times by accident, trying to be like, oh, I can dodge 1 hit. Nah, she ain't that great yet. Besides that, after I learned that lesson, I'm able to, you know, clear out a lot of the enemies with Vanessa. Tana can pick off the stragglers, get a few levels here or there. You know, I'm in no rush. I've got plenty of time to get Tana up to speed, but I do that. I move slowly down through. Amelia vanishes because I couldn't give a shit about her. I'm slowly going through the chapter, buying everything I need to, dealing with the enemy reinforcements, whatever. The most important drop in this chapter is that Axe Reaver from a soldier near the south area, so that's really great, and that's going to help me defeat the boss Binks, because Binks is a warrior, I believe. Not exactly easy to beat an axe using promoted unit without weapon triangle advantage. So Axe Reaver comes in and swaps it all around for me, so that makes my life real easy, and I move on to chapter 10, Revolt at Corsino. So Tana got like 4 levels in the last chapter, so that means I'm a little bit more willing to split up the 2 Pegasus Knights here. My strategy for this chapter, which for some reason I decide I want to rescue Innes. I think the main reason behind that is he has a white gem and I want that, but I could have just dropped it off and then used him as bait, but I didn't, so hindsight's 2020. The chapter goes pretty easily anyway, because what I do is I have Vanessa go to the south to protect Innes and the others, and then Tana stays up north guarding off the brigands and mages that are there. I'm not too concerned about mages, because mages aren't that great against Pegasus Knights, and the brigands I could just hide in the mountains if I get low. That's not the worst thing in the world. And also there's a fort there, so the forts are gonna do some healing, but I do blow through a lot of vulneraries. But again, I got a stipend like of 10k, so I could just buy a bunch more if I need to. And the great thing about this game is it comes with an armory in the preparation menu, so that's really helpful, considering this is only 1 game away from Path of Radiance, which is kind of crazy to me. But anyway, I digress. So once I've dealt with all of those enemies in the south and the north, the 2 Pegasus Knights combined come up together near the north. I quickly deal with the ballista enemies. They're not able to get a shot off because I stay out of range of the actual ballista, and I bum rush them in like 1 or 2 turns, and I deal with them real quickly. It's great. I get into their range so they can actually fire back. And then what I do have is I have Tana go up against the enemy boss Pablo, who's a bishop, so again, same sort of thing with the mages. I'm not too scared. Tana is able to take him down easily, and it's already level 15. Like 2 chapters and I get 11 levels. That's really great. I'm almost maxed on both my units again. And now we move on to chapter 11, Creeping Darkness. I really didn't expect this chapter to be quite as annoying as it was, but I guess it kind of makes sense. The main reason for this, of course, being that Fog of War. The Fog of War adds this whole other layer of difficulty that I just wasn't expecting to have on this sort of challenge, because everything's kind of been smooth sailing so far, and this has kind of changed that. So there's a lot more enemies, which in and of itself is pretty annoying. Pair that with all these different types of monsters that deal way more damage, like now we have hounds, skeleton archers, and gargoyles, and that kind of just screws me up, because not knowing where they are unless I kind of have this foreknowledge, which I don't memorize spawns because that would be kind of weird. I mean, hey, I don't knock anyone that does, but still, I don't pay that much attention to this game. That was mainly the issue, is I had a few resets just because I didn't know the exact placements of enemies, and that kind of left me with less foresight. And after doing a few resets, that kind of just went pretty well, mainly just from running directly into more enemies. You know, that was the main issue, it's just having more enemies. And so after some trial and error, we were chilling, and we move on to chapter 12, Village of Silence. So I think my brain was kind of on autopilot for this chapter because for some reason I decided to try and protect Sailor. I didn't need to. I could have just dumped off his weapons, sent him into enemy territory and said screw it, he can die for all I care. But I guess it was just autopilot more than anything, just a habit of trying to save everyone. So of course by choosing this option it's made my life harder than it needed to be, as I had to send Tana back in order to deal with the guys that were attacking Sailor. This chapter is a route chapter, so this took a lot longer than I was hoping to deal with all of the enemy reinforcements, but at least the nice thing is I could see the whole map unlike last time. I did almost lose Tana and Vanessa on the same turn due to my own cockiness of trying not to heal every turn, but not too bad besides that. I got out scot-free, always lucky, never punished. And even that boss, the centaur, was a complete joke. And with the end of this chapter, Tana has reached her level 20 cap with 31 HP, 18 strength, 17 skill, 20 speed, 18 luck, 10 defense, 10 resistance. Really high strength growths for a Pegasus Knights. I don't know what's happening here, but I'm not complaining. I am quite happy. Yeah, I'm just gonna run with it. I'm glad because normally these guys don't have the best strength growths. I mean, like Tana's is a little better than Vanessa's, but even then, not by that much. That's literally out of the 16 possible, I hit 11 out of the 16, which again, that seems wrong to me, but whatever. I'll take it. I don't care. 45%, as I said, she has a 45% growth rate, and maybe I just hit 45s every time, which is really lucky, but still kind of flimsy, but that's not really a surprise considering it's a Pegasus Knight, so... But we move on to chapter 13, Hamel Canyon. Alright, this is another one of those you have two options chapters. This is a survive 11 turns chapter or defeat the boss Ias. And also, halfway through this chapter, Pablo shows up. Unfortunately, this chapter does have a lot of archers and nomads, so I decided to play it a little bit safer and not go after Ias, and just to survive instead, because I actually did try it once, but I got screwed over by those nomad troopers, and voila, we ended up at the beginning again. So, instead, my idea was to hide in the bottom part of the map near the fort for extra HP. I get some nice lucky dodges, so I survived the initial archer push. And then kind of towards that halfway mark, Cormac does show up, so I recruit him and I grab his Elysian Whip, which he has on him, so I can immediately take Vanessa and promote her into a Falcon Knight, giving access to swords. Yippee! Not like I'm going to be using them too much, but in hindsight I probably should have, but we'll get to that later. I'm avoiding Wyverns to keep more of a Pegasus Knight theme, so I'm going to be promoting both Tana and Vanessa into Falcon Knights. I survived the chapter by using Cormac as bait for Pablo's Purge Tome, and by having Vanessa tank a lot of hits. So yeah, nice. Vanessa seems to be my bulky Pegasus Knight, and Tana is going to be my stronger attacker, which honestly I'm glad that the roles are split. That's going to be a little bit nicer for me in the long run. We move on to chapter 14, Queen of the White Dunes. I have both my units go to the right side to recruit Rennek for his member card, so I can use it on the secret shop that opens up this chapter for another Elysian Whip for Tana, so she can get her promotion. So as soon as I have that option to recruit him, a bunch of Cavaliers start showing up from behind. So in order to not get flanked, I leave Tana to deal with those guys, and then I have Vanessa slowly move up to deal with the archers and the knights in the next room. Again, Vanessa is a little bit more tanky, so I'm willing to let her take a hit against an archer, rather than Tana, who is most likely not going to survive. They rendezvous in the middle, while Rennek grabs that Elysian Whip. Thankfully, the rest of the chapter is pretty easy, and we get over to the boss. The boss, Carlisle, is a swordmaster with a wind sword, which is really good against flyers, so that's going to be kind of scary. Thankfully, while it can one-shot Tana, it can't one-shot Vanessa with her slightly higher promotional speed, which is beautiful. This lets me use the tried and true heal on player face strat. I use this way too often, but it works, so why would I break something that isn't broken? Or fix something that isn't broken, that's the expression, jeez. But instead this time I have a little stockpile of elixirs I've been saving up. So I crack into that and I'm able to deal with Carlisle, and we move on to chapter 15, Scorched Sand. So at least the nice thing in this chapter is I get to circumvent the worst part of this chapter, or in desert chapters in general, because I can just fly over, because the worst units are the horseback units, because they have that low mobility, like 2 or 3, but the Pegasus Knights have their full mobility. So that's not the problem here. The problem here is I still have to babysit Ephraim, because he joins up kind of a few chapters in, and if he dies, it's game over. So, because of that, the first thing I do here is I promote Tana into a Falcon Knight, and have her rush down south in order to protect Ephraim. This means I'm split off from my supplies, aka Vanessa and Tana are split, so I'll just have to make do and hope I have enough stuff. I set myself up that I do, but you know, depends. There's a lot of enemies this chapter, so might take a sec. But anyway, Vanessa takes on Kalik and wins that fight with relative ease after keeping her sword locked. This is the best opportunity for me to use swords because that basically means I have to force Kalik into a weapon triangle disadvantage, and Tomahawk's accuracy drops by like 30-ish to like 23, so I never even got hit, so that was pretty easy. That's the best time that we've had for using swords. That might honestly be like the best time in the whole run. But anyway, the problem here now is that those flyers had free reign on Vanessa while she slowly whittled down Kalik's HP. The problem with swords, no tier range, besides from Lightbrand, that's it. Thankfully that's nothing some vulneraries and the occasional elixir can't fix. And so while that's all happening, Tana goes south to deal with and protect Ephraim, as I mentioned before. And she's taken on those horseback enemies, and there are some nomad troopers and other nomads, and they make it a little scary, but surprisingly Tana pulled through, albeit barely. I left her on low HP and risked it a couple of times, and my recklessness pulled off, and I was able to take on Volter with Tana and crit him for the win, and voila. Now I have two insanely useful items. I have the Hoplon Guard and the Feli Shield. So the Hoplon Guard protects against crits, and then the Feli Shield protects against crits from archers, or, you know, the weapon triangle advantage with archers. So that's going to be very useful coming towards these later chapters. The only thing I didn't do this chapter is I didn't pick up any of the hidden items around the ground, but I'm sure that won't come back to bite me or anything, right? But anyway, we move on to chapter 16, Ruled by Madness. Alright, this is way easier than I was expecting, but I guess that kind of makes sense considering my plan. So my idea this chapter was to get to Orson as quickly as possible and take him down before the druids and other paladin reinforcements had time to catch up. Once again, I pretty much ignore all of the treasure, but that also won't come to screw me over, right? I'm sure. But the idea of just rush be no stop, just go straight for Orson, screw everything else, actually pulled off dramatically well. And Orson goes down to Tana easily, and that's it. Voila, we move on to chapter 17, River of Regrets. Okay, so this is the chapter in which we are going to be able to pick up our last party member. So I immediately sent Tana to recruit her, and that would be Cyrene, who's going to be the weak link here, unfortunately. Then that's mainly just due to how late she joins and how weak her stats are compared to all my other units. She is a level 1 Falcon Knight, and she doesn't have any of those like nice stat growths attached to her that my other units got, so she's like trash compared to them. However, I do still try to give Cyrene a bit of experience. But most of the enemies here outrank or are on equal to her in strength, so I cannot take on multiple enemies like I do with my other units. And that kind of puts her at slightly as a liability, but I'm trying to make it so she at least gets some experience here. Because of this, I'm unable to rescue all of the villagers, but I at least hold on to one so I don't get a game over. I'm not entirely sure if that happens or not, but it's always safe to just have one. Also, there's a nice shop here, so I stock up as much as I possibly can for endgame, and I just use the rest of that chapter to feed experience to Cyrene as best as I can. I have Vanessa defend the last child, as I said, and then I have Tana and Cyrene work their way towards the boss Leon, and Cyrene lands the last hit, giving her level 2. Wow. After all of that effort, I only got a whole level. That's great. Leon is a terrifying boss, however, he has really low accuracy. He does like 23 damage to Tana, which is like half her health, but he only has 31 accuracy, so I wasn't too scared about those odds. Now we move on to my personal favorite chapter in the entire game, chapter 18, Two Faces of Evil. This is an amazing chapter because it is the stat growth time. So I give all of my stat items to Cyrene just to make her try to be usable in these last few chapters at least. And since the other two were doing really well, I didn't really need to worry too much. But yeah, the whole concept of this chapter is you defeat the eggs and they give you 50 experience. And there's not a single enemy in this entire chapter that gave me any issues, not even that boss Gorgon. It is a route all chapter, and so the best strat is to hunt those eggs down as quick as possible, because if you don't, they're going to hatch into monsters that give, well, 1, they'll attack you, and 2, they'll give less experience. So it's just better idea to just rush down those eggs as quick as you can, and you can tell which egg is going to hatch by the fact that it's flashing. Like the regular ones won't flash, the ones that are about to hatch will flash. But yeah, again, very simple, quick, easy chapter. Nice. I love this chapter. We move on to 19, Last Hope. So we had a really nice chapter. Now they decided to punish us by giving us the FE8 equivalent of Battle Before Dawn. So this is very reminiscent of that, where we have to survive for 13 turns or defeat Reeve. Again, I play that same job that I did on the earlier chapter 13, where I just decide to hold out for the amount of turns. Now, the reason I say this is because my team is strong, but again, Sirens is still a little bit of a liability, and Tana and Vanessa can't do everything by themselves, especially with the fact that they cannot heal very easily. I mean, they have elixirs, but again, they need to be close to each other to heal consistently to get from that supply. But if they're too close, they won't be able to deal with more enemies, and it just becomes a bit of a clusterfuck there. So basically, the long and the short of this is I have Tana and Cyrene defend the southern and southwestern areas. I start towards where Reeve is, and I slowly back up because I'm being slowly pushed back towards the throne room. But that's okay, as long as, again, I'm not trying to defeat Reeve, I just want to survive. And then I have Vanessa focus on the northern area up there to defend against those guys. And then I kind of just ignore the right side and just hope that that doesn't bite me in the ass later. So I try to stay near Mansell, who's the king guy. I completely forgot his name for a long time. But anyway, just in case like Tana or Cyrene have to use Vanessa's supply, that's the main reason, because again, you're going to be finding a lot of enemies and you're going to need to get new weapons, new healing items, whatever it is. So keeping yourself near your supply units is going to be useful. And Cyrene, yeah, was way less help than she was. She was definitely a liability because of her low level. And I did have to reset a couple of times just due to poor placement and just dealing with too many enemies at once. But with enough resets and patience, I make it through. That's basically just the long and the short of it. It's just be patient. Let Tana deal 90% of the job, well, and Vanessa as well. Have Cyrene help and pick off units, and just be patient. And honestly, camping the throne room towards the end was not the worst strat I've ever had. You just have to kind of hope that, you know, Mansell can dodge a few hits. But anyway, with that pain in the ass over and done with, we move on to Chapter 20, Darkling Woods. Now, normally this is a pretty annoying, not terribly hard chapter, but this is like alright, you've got a lot of enemies to deal with. But I decide I just want to skip this chapter, basically. So I beeline it for the boss. Because I have that option of flying everywhere, I literally just go straight for Reeve and the zombie dragon, and I'm really surprised that this worked out. Tana deals with Reeve. A zombie dragon hits me on enemy phase and I live, and on the following turn I finish off the zombie dragon with Tana, and I seize with Vanessa. So with that, Tana is able to max out, and I'm surprised Tana maxed out before Vanessa did, but that just shows how much that extra strength has been helping me so far. And so she's got 49 HP, 23 strength, 24 skill, 28 speed, 30 luck, 17 defense, and 17 resistance. Jesus Christ, this is an amazing Tana. I don't know what happened, but I'm not complaining at all. This is amazing. I feel like I basically almost maxed out every stat. I mean, I didn't look at her averages or max because I feel like it would just ruin the magic. But this is really, really, really good. And I'm kind of very happy with the situation that I've been put into. I kind of just got a get out of jail free card for this. And she outpaced early Vanessa by a mile at this point, which is kind of crazy. She's done a lot better than Vanessa has. I started out really strong with her and be like, oh, this Vanessa is amazing. Both Tana and Vanessa have had really good growths. Cyrene, on the other hand, kind of shit, but whatever. We move on to our final chapter, Sacred Stone. Okay, again, this is another one where I'm forced to bring Ephraim along, which isn't terrible. All I've really got to do is make sure I avoid those Gorgons. And this chapter is pretty easy for the most part, but our big problems are the zombie dragons. Those zombie dragons do like half my health, and they're pretty accurate. So my strat, at least with Tana, I think I got more lucky with Vanessa, but Tana definitely I had to heal on player phase, attack on enemy phase. Just had to keep that strat up. Keep up the old Leon strat. Keep up the old everything that I've been doing this entire game strat. End turn elixir strat, baby. But anyway, so during that whole thing, Tana and Cyrene went left and Vanessa went right by herself this time. Because I'm like, alright, Vanessa's still slightly tankier, so maybe I'll be a little bit better off leaving her by herself. And it turns out that that was pretty much true. The rest of that chapter leading up to Leon is a breeze. That's nice. Not really any enemies that gave me any issues. Vanessa tanks a hit from Leon. So once we reach Leon, I clear out the few of those enemies in that immediate area just to open up a path to Leon. Vanessa is able to tank a hit from Leon at 5 HP, and then Tana swoops in on player phase and is able to get a nice lucky crit. I probably shouldn't have put Vanessa in harm's reach, but I was able to, again, never punished. I get lucky. Here is the problem child. Phase 2, For Mortis. Fuck For Mortis. Most annoying fucking boss in this entire game, easily. In most Fire Emblem games, it jumps up difficulty because they're like, fuck you. This is, like, compare this to whatever her name is. I can never remember her name from FE6, that dragon. That's an easy as hell boss fight. This is not. It's weird. Easy game, hard boss fight. But anyway, I digress. So, at this point, Vanessa's not quite level 20, which is honestly kind of surprising. But she's level 17, which is close enough. She's at 43 HP, 23 strength, 24 skill, 28 speed, 21 luck, 20 defense, and 18 resistance. Honestly, her stats are like basically the same as Tana's. Slightly worse because she's got 9 less luck, but all of her strength, skill, and speed are the exact same. So technically with those 3 extra levels, that's a little bit of room for growth if I needed to, but I'm not sure. I might have been capped on strength growths. I really don't know. Again, this is crazy. I don't know what the hell's happening, but it's great. Anyway, digressing. So the problem with this chapter is I have 3 benchmarks I have to hit. 3 RNG check rolls that I have to get. The first one is I have to have Demon Light miss 3 times in order to get this win. So that's the first problem. Second thing, I have to hope for no zombie dragon spawns. And then the third thing, if there is a zombie dragon spawn, I have to hope that they either miss or they're far enough away that it's not a problem to deal with in 2 to 3 turns. So the only weapon here that does any serious damage to For Mortis is the Vidolfnir, I guess that's how you pronounce it, which does about 19 damage times 2, so that's 38 damage. The boss has 120 HP. That means I need to 4 round to the boss. That means, as I said, Demon Light has to miss 3 times in order to win and keep my squad alive. Technically, I could have gotten away with it if I wanted to let them die or whatever, but I want all of my units to, because again, I only have 3, so I want them all to live through at the end. Yeah, so I didn't even realize this in the process of editing this video. I actually let Cyrene die. I completely thought I let her live, but I guess I got so over it at that point in the run that I was just like, that's great, she can die. So, scratch what I just said. Lamau. After like 15 to 20 minutes of just straight up sped up resets, like this wasn't slow, so I did a lot. I do pull off a miracle and I'm able to get 3 dodges. So one was like a 60%, one was a 70, and one was a 50 something percent. And I'm like, okay, nice. I will take that. But anyway, this was a very, very fun and quick, nice, easy run. I don't know why my RNG was so good, at least in the first little bit. Why my level ups were so crazy, but I'm not gonna question it. Also, one thing that was a little annoying though, it was I don't understand why triangle attacks didn't work. I tried it a few times, especially on this boss, but it didn't work. I don't know if I messed something up in my game files or if I'm just not doing it right. I'm really not sure, but I'm sure you guys will let me know. Anyway, again, the only chapters that really gave me any real difficulty were those first few beginning ones with the weapon triangle disadvantage. Chapter 5, Chapter 11, and Chapter 19, and then of course this one, and then everything else was kind of a cakewalk. So again, a nice easy one to get me back into things, because again, you know me. Upload once every 6 months type person. But hey, whatever, at least I'm consistent, right? Alright, well, thank you guys so much for watching. I've been Meteor Kaiser, and I'll see you all in the next one. But until then, as always, peace!